me all right? Fantastic. Good evening, my name is David Spados. I'm the publisher of the GES Gazette newspaper. We are a monthly bilingual community newspaper serving the Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea neighborhoods. We're proud to be hosting this event tonight along with our media co-host, the Greater Park Hill News, which we figured out is likely the longest running monthly community newspaper in the city, serving the Park Hill neighborhood. A few ground rules for tonight's debate. This is not a presidential debate. I'm not going to ask you to sit silently for 2 hours. However, if you like it here, feel free to please applaud, but please also keep that brief as we have a lot of questions and we want to ensure that undecided voters have the most opportunity to hear as many questions as they can from these three wonderful candidates. We have a number of questions prepared for this evening. Also, we are accepting questions from the audience. If you have a question you would like to ask, please raise your hand at some point, and Kara here from Greater Park Hill News will bring you an index card, and we're going to just ensure that there is enough redundancy in all the questions as we accept those, and we'll be inserting those later on in the evening. If you have signs and whatnot, you collect from the candidates, please keep them down so you're not blocking anyone else's view, raising them up at any point. Look at Kara, just a second here to hand out some cards. For this evening, we will be rotating questions in terms of who answers a question first. As you see, the candidates are seated in alphabetical order by last name. The majority of questions, candidates will have 1 minute answers. Each candidate also has 3 paint cards in front of them. Those are their rebuttal cards. Each candidate is allowed 3 rebuttals over the course of the evening. And they can raise the card. That will allow them 30 extra seconds after all 3 candidates have answered a question, if they would like to rebut or add something additional. And with that, I believe we are ready to begin. We will start with 1 minute introductions from each candidate. And are you ready on time? Fantastic. We will start with Juan Atlas.
Good evening.
Do you need to turn those off?
Restart the time.
All
right, cool. Good evening, everybody. My name is Quan Atlas. I am a father, a business owner, and community leader in the 5 Points area. I'm running to represent this district because I believe that we need leadership that's more responsive, educated, and innovative, and for the most part, just cares about the issues that matter most to the constituents. I'm proud to say that my campaign is soon to be reaching over 10,000 voters from either direct calls or knocking on doors. And we are hearing from the community that they're just dissatisfied with their current representation. So putting myself forward to be to be that solution for community. And really, the one thing that I've heard from community time and time again is that they are tired of politicians who do not deliver on their promises. And so with the work that I've done at all 3 levels of government, I can tell you throughout this debate different things that I've actually achieved for the community that they've asked for and things I will do in the future. Thank you.
Next, Candy Sedewaka.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Candy Sedewaka, your current D9 City Councilwoman and a lifelong resident of this neighborhood here in Swansea. I'm a first-generation high school graduate from Manual High School and eventually the University of Denver for both of my degrees. I was raised by a single mom and my grandparents right here in this community. I'm a social worker by training, a community organizer, and a policy expert. I'm the first Colorado elected official from the Swansea neighborhood. My vision for my role is to recenter the voices of people who are typically silenced or ignored. I believe housing should be a human right, food should be a utility, utilities should be municipalized, and the entire economy needs to be reimagined in a way that halts the exploitation of land, labor, and resources for profit. I value co-governance, transparency, and collective liberation, and I've dedicated my entire life to this community and will be honored to earn your support again.
Next, Darrell Watson.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for hosting this event. I want to call out my husband, who's sitting in the front row. For 18 years, he's been by my side. You're the rock of this campaign and the work that I do. I'd like to share briefly my qualifications for this role. 30-year career in finance where I focus on streamlining inefficiencies and streamlining bureaucracy. As a community leader, I've chaired the Housing Board for the City and County of Denver. We were successful in collaborating with community to pass the first of its kind affordable housing mandate in the state. And we have a whole lot of work left to be done. I focus on an environment in a lot of my board leadership, and as the current chair of the Denver Park Trust, we have invested over $250,000 in D9 neighborhoods during the pandemic. And once again, that's just the beginning. My friends, tonight I'm asking for your support. I'm asking for you to seek progress. Oh, thank you.
We'll start off with a lighter introductory question. In your own words, describe the character of District 9, what makes it notable, what makes it important, and what makes it different from other parts of Denver. And we'll start with Candy.
I love this question. Our district has some of the historically redlined communities, and I think that's an important part of who we are because our communities really grew and flourished in spite of government disinvestment and in spite of discrimination. And so we have a lot of strong ethnic enclaves that are still left, a lot that are fighting to hang on. We also have the downtown, well, partially the downtown area, and that I think is an interesting mix for needs, for desires, and now we have Park Hill, North Park Hill and South Park Hill, which also have their rich history as being a very settled community, a very stable community. Generations, multiple generations have raised families in those communities. So our communities are places where people move to stay. They would like to stay, they're trying to stay, and I'm hoping to help them stay.
I think the character of our neighborhoods, in 1997 I purchased my first house in Whittier. I chose the Whittier community because it's a community that has seen so much change. It was an African-American community for the last several decades when I purchased my home. And I chose to be there because I felt that I can provide leadership and support to folks. I knew that with Manual High School and the history of Manual High School, as well as the history of redlining that went through the Whittier community. Whittier is named after John Whittier Greenleaf, which is an abolitionist and a former poet. I think that describes our district completely. We're a community of neighbors and neighborhoods. We're a community of folks that work and fight for civil justice and civil rights. I chose to be there and chose to be present throughout my 27 years in District 9, and I hope to be able to serve you as your next city council person, representing all of the character of District 9.
Juan.
Yeah, District 9 is one of the oldest parts of the district. It has some of the most diverse and vibrant neighborhoods in the city, and our district really shoulders a lot of the resources and responsibility for taking care of the city. We really are the heart of the city, and in this debate, in this conversation, this race is really one of the most important races in this election because of that. We have some of the best businesses, some of the most hardworking folks, and really we have some of the best people. proud to be part of this district. So happy to raise my son in this district, and he has such an open life to meet so many different people of different walks and different places in our community. And so that's what just makes District 9 great, and I'd be honored to represent this district.
Before we move to our first topic, I'd be remiss, I forgot to thank one of the group, and that is, of course, CSU for having us here in this space today. So, we have several CSU Spur folks off the side, so thank you. Our first topic tonight will be housing and development. We'll have 5 questions on this topic. And the first question, we'll start with Daryl. It's a broad introduction to housing development. At a citywide level, what is the most important policy or policies the city can enact to address our housing crisis?
Thank you so much for this question. I had an opportunity to ride with Local 858 Denver Fire this weekend in Park Hill. And I rode in their fire truck and spoke with a young man. His name is Brandon. He lived in the District 9 neighborhood for about, District 9 community for about 12 months. And was unable to stay there. It's about a 23-year-old working young man fighting to be a part of a community, to build a family, and he just couldn't afford to live here. I think one of the most important things as an elected official that I can do is ensure that District 9 and that the City and County of Denver focuses on ensuring that Denver is affordable for working families. My husband is a teacher. Making sure that our teachers, the folks who clean our hotels and our streets and our homes can live in this community. As a policymaker, I helped to pass the first affordable housing mandate requirement within the City and County of Denver. And I look forward to continue working on housing policy with you.
Cool.
So there's a few different things that we need to do as a community. And first and foremost, we have to improve our community planning and development process. So many great projects are being stuck in our community planning office, and that means that the affordability that they have baked in becomes no longer affordable when it takes 3 years for them to finally bring those properties to market. Big passion of mine is expanding home ownership. So many people in our community, particularly black and brown folks, have been locked out of home ownership. That's what creates gentrification, because you do not have the same amount of resources and options when things become more expensive, and you don't actually get to experience that appreciation. Studies show when there's a population that has 70% ownership, gentrification isn't as contributing to racial displacement. Third thing, I'm willing to look at rent control, some sort of light rent control to really become a carrot, to talk about the transition from apartments to condo development, and we have to expand affordable housing funding.
Candy.
Thank you. I think you're going to hear affordability many times tonight. These neighborhoods, talking about their history, have a history of being neighborhoods where you have above average home ownership rates. And so maintaining that stability really lies in the regulation of development. It's great to want to streamline processes in CPD, but that's not within City Council's scope. What's within our scope is equitable zoning policies, making sure that we're demanding as much as we can get from developers. It's the government's role to regulate the free market and not let it run free. We can't expect the market to fix the problems when they've created them. We have to support innovations to make sure that there's every housing type in every neighborhood, and that includes everything from a tent to an apartment, to a condo, to a single family home. Everything needs to be available in every neighborhood, including halfway houses, and I know that's not popular.
Our next question, we'll start with Juan. The GES community has traditionally served immigrants and working class families. Now longtime residents are being priced out, and those working class families struggle to buy into the community. Do you feel this change is a problem? And if so, what policies would you support to help working class families live in Globeville, Elyria, Swansea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I believe that we can take a program that I actually piloted within the African American community and bring that into the brown community in our GES neighborhood, and that is really looking at credit. We have been locked out of credit systemically, and there's a lot of different challenges, but what we found is that folks who struggle with credit to be able to buy a home actually don't have that many problems with that. So what we did, we actually put our money where our mouth is, help people pay down things that were plaguing their credit, teach them about credit, and we were able to get them into programs, and we got 7 families into home ownership. That's really what I think is going to stop it. Of course, we have to look at different spots within GES, but there are opportunities to build more units. You cannot be committed to affordable housing and stopping gentrification if you don't put new units in that neighborhood, so folks who maybe have left can come back. And so I want to bring more development to the area so that folks can come back and then hope to bring more sustainability for the homeowners that are in the area.
Candy.
One of my favorite innovations that I think can really support this community are community land trusts. It's something that I participated in creating. The GES Tierra Colectiva is the first and only community-led land trust in the city of Denver, and it was really born from residents in this community who have really decided that that's the best way for us to own land. Collective ownership protects people from individual hardships, being able to wipe out their home ownership like we experienced in the recession when we lost, I think it was about 11% of Black home ownership throughout the 5 Points area. I think that we have to also make space for housing cooperatives, and tiered taxation needs to be a conversation.
Quan did raise a rebuttal card, so we'll go to Daryl and then back to Quan. Daryl.
I think it's important to listen to community voices. The GES Coalition worked collaboratively with Pure Development on the Fox property that's near this building. And they had a $6.5 million community benefit agreement that they passed, that they worked over a 1.5 years collaboratively with this development, with community, to make sure that they had a say. Within that $6.5 million, there was rent assistance, there was home buyer subsidies that were provided. They had a say in that process. They were able to build a park and then look forward to having connections to neighborhoods that are surrounding them. As their city council person, it's my responsibility to sit with them, listen to their thoughts, and when they request and ask for and fight for action on housing to make sure that they can stay in their neighborhoods, that I support them and not vote against them. I think that is important. Within the work that I'm doing with the Denver Housing Board, we're also passing a policy that provides prioritization for folks who have been displaced, and I'll spread that throughout the city.
Quan, an additional 30 seconds.
Yeah, so land trust is something that I wanted to point out. I think that it is an excellent tool, part of the toolbox, but I just want folks to understand that what land trusts do is actually suppress the long-term appreciation value for the homeowners. So if we expand that and we target that within communities of color, what we'll have down the line is generations of folks who do not have the same appreciation as folks who got buying their homes traditionally, therefore increasing the income inequality and wealth gap in our country. And so we have to be careful with that model, but it's definitely a model for folks who are interested in that.
Moving on, Candy will have answer first up next. This question relates to Park Hill. Smaller homes and older brick bungalows have been traditional starter and family homes in Park Hills and other parts of the district like Whittier, Cole, 5 Points. In all of these communities, these homes are increasingly being scraped and replaced with more expensive homes of very different design. Some refer to this as gentrification and decry the loss of character to our neighborhoods. Others say it's the logical progression of newer housing meeting homeowner needs. What are your thoughts on these changes, and how should the city respond?
I absolutely agree with folks who believe that it's a loss of character, it's a destruction of our history. I also think that it's problematic for our sustainability goals. We just recently passed the Waste No More, or Pay As You Throw, And one of the reasons I voted against that was because residents generate less than 14% of trash in the city. But construction and demolition, they represent over 40% of the waste generated in our city, and we don't hold them accountable for anything. And a lot of these scrapes are not required to recycle any of those beautiful bricks. They're not required to do anything with those. So in addition to destroying our character of our long-standing neighborhoods, I think it is contradictory to what we're trying to achieve as far as sustainability goals go.
Yeah, I think it's important as a city council member to actually sit and listen to community. That was part of my answer for the last question as well. Park Hill as a whole does not have an area plan. A city council person have not sat down with the neighbors in Park Hill to ask what the character is of their neighborhood. What do they want to sustain? As your city council person, the first thing I will do is streamline that area plan process, ensuring that we expedite the steps to take so that Park Hill neighbors have the right to decide the type of development in their community. I think it's important as you look at the communities of Park Hill and other single-family home communities. These communities want for them and their children, maybe their parents, to be able to live in those same communities. It's too expensive. I spoke to the Brown family in Park Hill recently as well. They want their daughter to be able to move back into Park Hill. She cannot buy a home, and so they want the ability to build an ADU. Now I'll work to ensure that we have gentle density throughout Park Hill and that we have an area plan to meet that goal.
Juan?
Yeah, so I think my colleagues have some great and excellent answers. I do think it's up to the community that lives there to decide, do we want more density? Do we want to increase our property values by loosening up the zoning? Do we want to be able to provide more units of affordable housing? And do we want to be more sustainable by keeping the traditional buildings that are in the community? And so I agree with Daryl, we do need a community planning process. But again, those processes take a long time. And it doesn't sometimes feel like the city is listening to the neighbors as well as getting the entire perspective. And so one thing that I commit to is having diverse representation with folks who are advising me and getting leaders from different parts of our community so that we can have a collective response to the different challenges and issues. These are tough decisions that we have to make when we talk about changing our neighborhoods.
Our next question will begin with Daryl. What specific policies, if any, would you support as a council member to reduce the population of people living on Denver streets? When do you feel it's appropriate for the city to conduct a sweep of unsanctioned encampment to remove it?
And that's a powerful question. I start most of my answers with a story because that's where I'm from the West Indies. We tell stories to kind of direct the policies that we lead. My oldest sister died homeless on the streets. She went through mental health and substance abuse issues, and over a 10-year period, our family was not able to save her, to get her housed, to get her the support that she needs. So the first and foremost, my policy priorities when it comes to unsheltered community is to reduce the number of folks that are living unsheltered on the streets year over year. It is not compassionate for over 300 folks to die in Denver on an annual basis. It is also important to make sure that our policies are focused on that reduction. So we need to know the number of folks that reside or are living unsheltered on the streets or living in motels. We have steps that we can take. It's the Built for Zero policy and process that's worked across the country. We'll implement that process and that policy and also work to make sure that we're spreading safe outdoor sites throughout the city.
Juan?
First off, I want to say my condolences to you, Daryl, and that story. It speaks to me personally as my mother is experiencing homelessness due to her schizophrenia. What I would never want to happen is to get that call that my mother died on our streets because we're allowing encampments. No precinct in the city and county of Denver voted to overturn the camping ban, and that's something that needs to be respected. Our council person has done everything that she can do to try to remove that policy that is really to save lives. I think that we should not be allowing encampments under really any circumstances, but what we have to do is bring the policies that are going to actually shift it. And what we need to do is look at folks like my mother's dealing with mental health issues. We need to have a long-term commitment to taking care of her for the rest of her life. We have folks who are elderly, and we have folks who are handicapped that can't work. We need to be able to provide some meaningful work for them. We have teens, LGBT folks in tough families. We need to reconnect those families or get them into better families, providing solutions to the actual issues that are causing homelessness rather than just talking about housing and encampments.
Thank you. I think we know exactly how many people are on our streets every year. We get a count of that, and we have organizations that count throughout the year. What we know we don't need is more shelter expansion. It's the least preferred amongst people who are on the street, and there are open shelter beds when we have people camping. The only solution to getting people off the street is permanent housing, and that can look a lot of different ways. And in the meantime, while we get there, the innovations that we have to provide include safe outdoor spaces, which I helped make sure we had in the city, safe parking spaces. We need to experiment with master leasing. When we talk about why people are on the streets, mental health and substance abuse play a huge role in people living on the streets in tents, and we don't have anywhere to send people besides the jail. And so if we're serious about getting people off the streets, we need to fill that gap.
There always a rebuttal card, 30 seconds more.
I appreciate that the council member said that we know the number of folks on the streets. As the chair of the housing board, I know that our process every year for the point in time count is done mostly on the coldest day of the year. And you would think intentionally, unintentionally, that's the night when the majority of folks who are actually living on the streets are actually in shelters. So it is a poor count process. As I stated, 300 folks have died in our streets. That is not a process that we can maintain. And as your city council person, I'll make sure we count everyone and we save lives.
Final question on housing and development also comes from a attendee here who submitted it beforehand. And we'll begin with Juan. We often hear about affordable housing programs for those earning well below the area median income, which are of course important. But what steps should be taken to make housing more attainable for the quote missing middle, those who might be earning 80 or 100% of AMI, like teachers or nurses? And for our audience, Denver area median income is about $73,000 per year, or $83,000 for a couple.
Yeah. So this is a big passion of mine. We have folks who do make these incomes, and they still struggle with housing. I'm in that category. I have seen the same two-bedroom that I'm renting go up almost $1,000 in the last 5 years. I needed resources to be able to move into homeownership. Folks in that same category to move into homeownership. We need to expand what we understand as affordable housing, and really the city needs to come up with more incentive factors for the folks who own these buildings as well as own homes, regular day landlords, to be able to say, hey, I have a bedroom, I'd like to offer it at a lower cost rate. Can the city come in and provide that affordability? We should be able to do that, not just on the development side, but for the units that are currently out there right now.
The irony is that the majority of affordable housing is being built for people making 80% of the AMI and above, which, if there is a missing middle, then that should clue you into how much less housing there is available for anybody making below 80% AMI. We heard it earlier, price control is really one of the only options I think we have left for ourselves. And we have a bill in the state legislature right now that is trying to repeal the ban on rent control, and we need to be able to step into action and implement rent stabilization measures if we get that local control. I also think that it's important for us to recognize that it's not just the market that is impacting the cost of living. We had a recent article come out that proved to us that prices are being engineered by an algorithm that's inflating prices. and folks need to be paying attention to that as well, and we can regulate that.
Yeah, I shared Brandon's story, the firefighter that I met with this past weekend. And to answer directly the question about workforce housing, we can't have a vibrant city where the folks who work and build our city can't live here. For firefighters and teachers that teach and keep us safe to be able to live here. It's essential, it is important. The things that we need to do is implement enhancing housing affordability. Review, is that increasing affordable housing for a missing middle or for workforce housing? And execute in incentives or actually holding accountable developers to make sure that housing is being built. We need to look at our permit process. For permitting, 18 months it takes for all types of housing. As your city council person, I'll work directly with council members and with CPD to make sure that we expedite affordable housing, especially for working families. Lowering it to 90 days so that we can meet the dollar thresholds from Prop 123 and unleash dollars that can help us build more housing for working families.
That ends our housing and development section. We have one related question about how housing has entered campaign tactics being employed this spring. This question comes from the Greater Park Hill News. Over the last few weeks, several anonymous mail pieces have been arriving in mailboxes across the city. I'm guessing all three of you are probably familiar with having seen these. Great. They say, amongst other things, that affordability is on the ballot this April, yet they do not have a legal disclaimer, and no person or group has taken credit for them. While they do not directly say vote for or vote against, many residents have seen them as a tool to attack the incumbent in this race while dodging campaign finance laws. We'll go slightly out of order to answer this question. First, Candy, please explain why you opposed several development projects with affordable housing component at a time the city is facing a housing crisis. In a number of instances, you were the lone or nearly lone vote opposing projects that had an affordability component.
Yeah, I think it's interesting the way that we understand what happens. I've been part of voting on over 6,000 bills since I've been in office. And one of the things that happens with bills that are going to be controversial is they get named a particular way to influence people on the outside to make people think it's one thing when it's not necessarily that thing. The expanding housing affordability bill that we voted on, you would think that that was just one thing. That included incentives for market rate developers to remove parking requirements. That included a linkage fee for people who were not doing affordable housing development, a linkage fee that would be phased over multiple years. It also included a mandate for different types of markets and affordable housing development, and it ranged and basically codified the status quo, which hasn't gotten us what we needed so far.
Daryl and then Quan, what are your thoughts on these anonymous mailers, which are clearly intended to attack your opponent? Are you aware of who sent them? Are these tactics appropriate? And do you agree with the message or medium used here? We'll start with Daryl.
So let me start first with kind of answering the question that was asked of the Councilmember Sidibaka. Council is not a zero-sum game. As a council member, there's legislation that will come before each of us. We have an opportunity to look at the issues and make decisions on the issue that's in front of us. Not every bill is going to provide housing for all levels and all spectrum of housing, but enhancing housing affordability, the first mandatory affordable housing policy in the state, is one that we should all support. We should support affordable housing at any time. The council member has the opportunity to bring forward deeply affordable housing initiatives and policies if she chooses to. I think it's essential that we pass affordable housing. For example, within Globeville, very near here, the Pure Development, once again, as I said, neighbors in GES worked for a year and a half to work on a community benefit agreement They worked hard providing dollars for rental assistance and for subsidies, and the council member voted against them.
We'll move on to Kwan, and then Kim, did you raise a rebuttal card? We'll go back to her after. Kwan.
So let me answer the question directly. No, I do not know who sent these mailers out. No, I don't agree with the mailers. We all know why Kim voted no on these bills. She did not believe that they were good enough. But did she have the political and social capital among council and with the mayor's office and with the agencies that were crafting this legislation to change it to where she wanted it to be? Absolutely not. And that's the problem that we have here. So when we talk about the linkage fee, we talk about the parking, we talk about development requirements, all these were good new things. It's not the status quo. Development community did not like it. But does the council person that we currently have the ability to do anything about it? And that's the problem here. On the mailers, we need stronger legislation against mailers like this. Dark money influencing our election is a problem. And in fact, the reason why we have our current council person was the amount of dark money spent in the last election. So we have to change it. It has to be more transparent. We have to look at who is trying to influence our elections. I'm getting straight to it.
Before we move back to Candy, I'd like to remind the audience to please be silent while candidates are answering the question, and to respect the time each of them has. Thank you.
Yeah, David, just quickly, I didn't answer the direct question, and I apologize. If I can have just one quick second to say, I don't know who sent out the mailers. I don't support sending out anonymous mailers. And for the investment folks I've had in my campaign, when I send a mailer, I will happily list my name, my face, and what I believe in. So, thank you.
Candy, if there's a time this evening you need to clarify, you'll be afforded the same opportunity. And Candy.
I just want to, so Daryl implies that we should accept whatever's in front of us, no matter what it is. And I think that should be appalling to voters, that you should expect us to accept crumbs on your behalf when the city has been raped by developers. And we essentially said, oh, it's okay, here, let us give you even more of an opportunity to steal the opportunity of affordable housing from people in our city.
Thank you. We'll move on. Oh, I'm sorry.
I have a second first.
Thank you.
I appreciate the council member paraphrasing what I said. What I said is the council members demonstrated the inability to work constructively with their fellow council members to pass meaningful legislation. If the council member doesn't believe in the legislation that is before her, she has an opportunity during committee process and through the legislative process to make a change. So the council member can sit here and come after me because of her inability to actually pass real affordable housing through our 4 years as a city council member. I will not do that. I will work with my council members and I'll get the work done.
Another card for 30 seconds.
Yes, again, I think it's a reflection of my colleague here not paying attention to what's happening. I mentioned earlier, I voted on 6,000 bills since I've been in office. 95% of the time, it's been in alignment with my colleagues. To be a rubber stamp is not what I signed up to do. It's not what you elected me to do. And I think that when we talk about working with other council members, we should also value working with community. And that's what I do. And sometimes they need my vote more than these other council members do, who are bought and paid for in many of these situations.
Any further remarks? All right. Thank you. We'll move on to 3 questions about small businesses and the economy. We'll start with Daryl. The 5 Points neighborhood has recently seen a number of business closures. What do you see as the cause, and what can be done to support businesses in the 5 Points community?
Yeah, this is heartbreaking. I can tell you my mom lives in Curtis Park, and her favorite restaurant is Walton Street Cafe. And as we walk into Walton Street, the smell of smothered pork chops takes her back. It's not just a business. It takes her back to our home, it takes us back to our family, it takes us back to our roots. The closing of Walton Street and Melody Market recently, the closing of Coffee at the Point, tears at the heart of our community. It's a lack of leadership, a lack of imagination to support these businesses and ensure that they can thrive in 5 Points. As a city council member elected to D9, you have, if it's not a clear bullet point that you are the champion and the supporter of 5 Points businesses and 5 Points history, it is clear that that is a mandate for you to use all means necessary to ensure that these businesses survive. I'll work and make sure that the Herman Malone Fund applies to 5 Points businesses. I'll work with the Gary communities to make sure that we provide funding and support for small businesses to make sure that they can come back and survive on the point.
Juan.
So this is directly to my heart of why I'm running as well. As the founder of the 5 Points Atlas, I reported on many of these businesses opening up in the community. Now to be listening to them, many of them that you all don't even know about yet, talking about they might be closing. And it's heartbreaking. I created this newspaper to report on these specific businesses, so to see them to see them having to close is a problem. The biggest thing that we can do about it is expanding ownership, but it's also leadership and it's also patronage. If you go down Walton Street right now, you'll see multiple businesses with my poster and my sign in their business because I show up and I've been there throughout the pandemic. I was bringing them resources, bringing them different opportunities, creating events, all type of stuff, being creative. One thing I've heard time and time again is, Candy could walk through my door right now and know what she looks like. We need leadership that shows up in our community, and that's what I bring to the table.
Candy.
I think it's very simplistic to look at the problem as what could we be doing when they're already in shutdown mode. We have to recognize that many of the things we put into place are actively pushing businesses out. Special districts, for example, on the Walton corridor in particular, have been very problematic. It's an extra taxation on top of taxes that are already skyrocketing for businesses that were struggling to hold on from the very beginning. And so when I got into office and tried to start working to help our businesses, I was looking at the systemic issues that are pushing them out, knowing that they would be pushed out eventually. So to panic and beg the mayor for grants and all of that extra stuff to keep them in business a month longer, 2 months longer, yeah, we were doing that. We don't have control over it. But the things that I was pushing were many of those things that you mentioned earlier of me voting alone on.
Next question, beginning with Juan. What do you feel is a living wage in the city today? How can we balance worker wages and rising costs on small businesses?
I believe that living wage is easily $65,000, $70,000 a year or more. And if you have kids, you have to be doing even more than that. And that's really unfortunate because it's never really been what Denver is about. But it's where we're at now. And so I'm a council person that's going to be looking at how can I increase your wages? How can I create workforce development? I'm currently the director of the Montbello Building Wealth Center, and what we're doing is training entrepreneurs, getting folks ready for the careers of tomorrow, and we're bringing resources to bear. I'm not going to just say, sorry, it's the developer's fault. Sorry, it's the city's fault. I'm going to actually go out and create jobs, and that's what I've been doing. And so I think we have to have just more creative leadership that's not just looking at placing blame.
Candy.
Well, I do want to remind folks that I got to vote on the increase in minimum wage, and while I voted to support it, I talked about how if we continue to not recognize that we have to be pushing down while we're pulling up, we're never going to achieve what we're looking for. That's why inflation is killing everyone right now, because when you raise the bottom up and you don't have anything pushing down for price control, everything, the cost of everything just bumps up with it. And so I think the only solutions that really exist when it comes to wages are to envision a new economy. We have to start talking about wealth building in a different way. People want to own their labor. They don't want to continue working for slave wages. And that's essentially what we've got right now. So I want to see us expanding employee-owned companies, converting companies to employee-owned companies, expanding cooperatives, and I think we need to decommodify the basic needs, the basic essentials.
Darryl.
Yeah, I appreciate what the council member just said about a new economy. But I'm stuck on what she said in her last statement around 5 Points businesses. Sitting with those business owners who lost their business, it's not enough for the council person in D9 to say, okay, you already lost your business. There's nothing left for me to do. When I sit and I speak with Fatima, and I speak with Ryan Cobbins, there is pain in our community. Our Black community is hurting. There's a moral imperative of the council member in District 9 to care about the businesses on our strip that we have fought for generations. The council member could say that there's begging the mayor for money and throwing dollars at it isn't enough. But you're 0.25 miles from the strip. You should have been on that strip before those businesses failed, before the lawsuits began. I would be there for 5 Points business because it's a moral responsibility, not just a policy failure by the council members.
In the interest of making sure we get to other topics, we're going to move on to transportation. We have 4 questions. Whether for traffic or environmental reasons, there's a growing consensus we need to get more people out of cars and into other modes of transportation. Do you agree, and what policies would you support? We'll begin with Katie.
I absolutely agree. I've mentioned before, I live in the most polluted zip code in America, and a big source of that pollution is coming from all kinds of transportation that we shoulder the burden for right here in this community. And so I would love to see us get out of cars, but it requires us to do a lot of work before we get there. Our transportation system is not reliable. We are relying on a state or a regional department to basically negotiate with rural counties who have no interest in public transportation. Therefore, they're never going to fund it fully, and we have nothing else to supplement it. And so, like many other cities, I think we need to supplement RTD services. We need to have our own robust circulator system. We also need complete streets. I can see something in my neighborhood and can't get to it without getting on the highway. How do you do that on a bike? How do you do that walking? We need to do a lot more to complete that grid first, too.
I think transportation is independence for many of our community. My mom lives in Curtis Park, and she catches 2 buses to go to Safeway. That's her independence. RTD is not reliable. We need to really focus on micro-transit opportunities throughout the city, ensuring that Dottie expands the Montbello connector throughout District 9, not just in GES, but also to the 38th and Blake stop, to reduce the mile to and from current public transportation. We need to ensure that we have safe streets, that for folks that are riding bikes, that we have protected bike lanes throughout that connect to the places that we want to go and places we want to be. We need to make sure that Denver has safe sidewalks, and I support Denver deserves sidewalks. Making sure that our elders and our families can be safe in our streets, in our sidewalks, that we have multi-modal transit options beyond RTD. That really is beyond the premise of Denver City Council. I'll focus on expanding Dottie and provide funds for that.
Juan.
I do agree with it, but I do want to caveat and say this. As Coloradans, we need the ability to get to the mountains. We need the ability to get to the other side of town. And so when we talk about getting rid of cars, we're talking about folks who need a car to get to work. And when we live in the urban core, we do have options. I have the option to get on the L line. It's right outside my apartment. I have protected bike lines. I have scooters that are right there. Every street should be the same way, where you have a sidewalk, you have a protected bike lane, and you have a way to drive a car and get on rail. The problem with our infrastructure is that we have too much street level rail. You really can't get anywhere fast. I'm committed to looking at how can we get rail that's either above the city or below the city, and that's faster. We need to be talking about shared electric vehicles and micromobility in a stronger way. And when we change our streets, when we develop, and particularly around business districts, we need to make sure that we have the investment to protect those businesses. When they redeveloped Walton Street in the 90s, it completely decimated the community. And so we need to make sure we avoid that in the future.
Next question will begin with Daryl. Vision Zero, with a goal of 0 traffic fatalities in Denver by 2030, does not seem to be working. Last year, there were 82 traffic-related deaths on Denver streets. What workable solutions do you have to reduce the number of pedestrian and cyclist injuries and fatalities?
Yeah, I think Vision Zero has become a tagline. It's not a policy that's being executed on or executed on well. The amount of deaths and vehicle deaths that are occurring is something that can't continue. Our streets are made in a way that encourages folks to drive fast. We need to look at creating policies that slow down speeds, that reduce the size of boulevards throughout the city and county of Denver. Providing bike lanes that provide opportunities for folks to ride slower. I think Dottie is beginning to do some good work. As you look through Curtis Park, you look through Whittier, they're providing barriers that make folks drive slower when they're making turns so that pedestrians and crosswalks aren't impacted. There's some common sense steps that we must take, and we need to continue doing those. Taglines like Vision Zero doesn't work. Clear policy to make sure that our streets are safer, that they're more narrow, that they're tree lined, and that they provide for multimodal transit will work.
I really have to disagree with the phrasing there. Vision Zero is the vision. It needs to be zero. No one should die on our streets. I think one thing is, now that we have decriminalized jaywalking, we need to decrease jaywalking. So we need to look at ways we can do that. We need to slow down our streets. We need to look at traffic calming areas. And we really need to listen to community members. When I talk to folks in different RNOs, they know where the problematic streets are, but yet they say they complain about the same streets, the same intersections, and it doesn't seem like the city is doing anything. I'm going to be that council person that's going to say, hey, what are we doing about this? And it needs to happen now. But we also have to have the social political capital, know who are in these agencies that can actually get that stuff done immediately.
Kenny.
I kind of want to build on Kwan's comments, because I think that it's not just about social and political capital. I think the structure is fundamentally wrong. The executive branch of government has too much power and doesn't understand how to wield that power. For example, how can we have a mayoral supported Vision Zero plan, but when I have constituents calling me asking for stop signs or stop lights or speed bumps, we have to wait until DPD has had enough fatalities or life-threatening injuries in order for Dottie to even consider a street design change or a traffic calming measure. Those things are, it's incongruent. And we need to be able to be the check and balance to those kind of incongruencies when they exist. And we don't have that authority as council people, and I think we need to change that so that we can be the check and balance when there is a tagline that we want to see become a real vision and reality.
Thank you. Our next question will begin with Kwan. The western part of Globeville is sometimes called Fox Island because of its isolation. It will likely receive several new connectors as new development is planned to bring several thousand people into the area. There's been some controversy as what sort of connections are appropriate. Would you support connections to the west Sunnyside, north, south? Would you like to see car, bike, or something else sort of connections?
Yeah, as I said in my earlier responses, we have to provide all the connections and all the modes of transportation for folks. Knocking doors in this community was super frustrating the first time I did years ago, because it was so hard to get in and out and get to even the next block. That is not sustainable for the folks that live there, and it's not right, honestly. So we have to do more. We have to provide more equity in our transportation policies. And so I think as we have the development coming and we are having the developers pay for some of this change, it's going to be a positive change. But I'll be supportive of all of that. We need every mode so that folks can make their decision and create a mix of costs for their family that works for them.
Candy?
I think this is complicated because yes, we can have the developers paying for that infrastructure, but if you have a community that's telling you they don't want more vehicle traffic in their neighborhood, I think we also have to honor that. And Glowville and Swansea are not necessarily asking for the same connections that the developer wants. And so I think that we have to prioritize the people who have lived in those communities and let their voices be heard, and not just make the connections that will make a developer's development successful, but rather make a community feel safer and more healthy. Because maybe their access to that neighborhood is not their priority, and they're being used as a way to get through or to a place and not as a destination.
Daryl?
I think it's important to listen to community when they speak. So I roll back to the Fox development that's being done by Pure Development, and that exact connection that you're speaking to. The community spent, once again, well over a year discussing connections, discussing housing, and negotiating with the developer, providing plans for what type of connections they wanted to Sunnyside, to Glowville, and to communities to Cole, to this center right here at CSU. And we're providing the chance for support from the council member, and the council member voted against them. I think it's important that when we ask the community to say what type of connections we want, we ask the community to say what type of housing we want, we ask the community what type of amenities we want, from grocery stores to parks. When they say this is what we want, as your council member, I will listen to you.
Mr. Kwan would like a rebuttal, 30 more seconds.
Yeah, I just wanted to underline that just with my outreach in the area, I've heard folks wanting better connected to the different parts of the community, and even folks who do live in the surrounding areas wanting better connection to that area. And so this underlines really a difference in how I believe a council person should operate. Yes, should the council have more control? For sure, but they should be a delegate listening to the people, not a trustee telling you what you're supposed to think. And that's the problem in this election.
Final question for transportation. We'll begin with Candy. Now that the I-70 expansion is nearly completed, what are your thoughts on the outcome? If a similar expansion happens in the future, what would you like to see differently?
I think that early indicators of the final outcome happened a few months ago when we had the flood, and it was very consistent with what people in the community cautioned CDOT about. We knew it would flood, and that was the first time, and probably not the last time. I think we've watched a lot of businesses be lost to the construction. We've lost a lot of neighbors to the construction, and there isn't a lot of connectivity. When you're trying to cross, it's not the wonderland that people described it to be. It is not 100% permeable, where the bridge at least was 100% permeable throughout the neighborhood. And I think that presents some challenges. We're also all very confused about the park that we were promised and what we currently have. It's not a park, it's very strange, And I hope it's not complete, so we'll see.
Daryl.
Yeah, I think I-70, the process brings up great emotions on many sides. I think the opportunity for leadership, that when something that's controversial is completed, that a leader leads and bring folks together on where we're going next. So the outcomes of I-70. One of the great outcomes is the community benefit requirement that Kiewit provides community-based air monitoring to make sure that families like mine, I grew up with asthma, and make sure that families in Globeville can monitor the impacts to their families and their family health long-term. I think that's a long-term good outcome. The ability to have green space to ensure that they have a park that connects to community. I think that's important. Stormwater drainage occurs through that part of town, through I-70. Making sure that we get it right and that Kiewit made changes to make sure they get it right, holding them accountable, I think is important.
Yeah, first and foremost, I do want to say that I do believe that what Candy is talking about is something that we need to directly focus on. But I will say that the project is not done, the connections are not finished, and so the problems with getting across I-70 are still yet to be addressed. It's a little too early to demonize the project, but as councilperson, I commit to working with folks like Candy on what do we do about it? What do we do about the long-term impacts of this project and how it's affected the community, both the businesses and the residents? And again, I'm not going to hang my head and say it's over. I'm going to say we can create some new development to bring folks back into the community, and they should have the first right to do that. We should be able to bring those businesses back to the community, and we need to make sure that the connections in the surrounding area around this highway that we all do benefit from, getting to DIA, getting to the mountains, that the folks that live around this highway benefit the most from this change.
Thank you. We'll move on to the topic of crime and safety. And the first question goes to Daryl. What more can be done to prevent car thefts, either the entire car or catalytic converters, package thefts from Porsches, and other non-violent but often expensive crimes?
I'll start with car thefts. I had a discussion with neighbors in the Clayton neighborhood. And this one young lady shared that she has one car. She works in the third shift, and that's the only way she can get to and from work. She goes to bed concerned. If she wakes up and her car is gone, she can lose her job. It can increase housing instability. The rise in crime is impacting families in ways that we haven't had in the city and county of Denver. One specific point, the city and county of Denver does not have a police department, a police team specifically focused on car thefts. That team was disbanded, it's not funded. I think it's important that in a city in the crisis that we're in, that we have folks dedicated to ensure that we reduce the number of cars that are being theft in our communities, and we're holding people accountable that do those thefts. Safety is one of the reasons why folks stay in communities. Safety is one of the reasons how people can maintain their housing. It's important that as a city council person, we make sure that our city is safe.
This is a big important issue to me. As I talk to folks throughout the community, you would think that housing and affordability is the top issue, but a lot of folks are pointing to this. This is really the extra tax of living in the city and county Denver now. Your cars are getting broken into, your stuff is getting stolen, people are messing with your property. And what is our city doing about it? And so I'm going to hold our city accountable. We have to provide more funding to our public safety department to increase the outreach that we have. Really, our police and detectives are supposed to be figuring out who took my stuff and how do I get it back. And for a lot of folks, when they make these calls, they're getting lackluster answers, and they're getting not the level of quality of service and treatment that they deserve. That's the main principle of government, is to protect private property, and we're just not doing that. One thing that I'll point out is I was at a bid meeting before this, and the person said there was new graffiti on this building by them. They went and found the tagger on Instagram, and they said, why didn't the police go find the tagger?
Andy?
I think we've hit on a couple of different things, and I think the approach is not more money for the cops. I think what we're recognizing is there is no accountability for what the cops are supposed to be doing. Most of us have a baseline expectation that cops solve crimes. Cops hold criminals accountable. Cops find criminals. And I think what we've recognized is that as our police budgets are growing and growing, there's less and less of that ability to hold cops accountable for doing those basic things. And so I think that it's not about giving them more money, but about having more expectations about how they're doing their job, what their job is. I think we need to open up the collective bargaining process so that we don't continue to get steamrolled by the police union, because it's basically patrolling means just driving around in the neighborhood, not solving crime, and that's half their budget.
Next question will begin with Juan. As reported in January 29th Denver Post article, gun-related deaths are down last year, but gun-related injuries have increased. What more can the city do to reduce violent crime?
Yeah, when we look at violent crime, a lot of it is being committed by our young folks. A lot of it is being committed around our entertainment districts and areas. And what we need to really address is meeting these youth and providing them more opportunities and really stopping the violence. That takes intentional work with experts and folks that are in the community doing this every day. And unfortunately, our city does not do great business with these organizations. I have the support of many of these organizations and leaders because my commitment to providing them more funding and easier access to that funding. It can't just be reimbursement, and it can't be a matching program. We need dollars in our community, stopping the violence, reaching the hearts. We need more jobs in our community. This is an issue that cannot be answered in 1 minute, so I would love to expound upon it. But what I'll say is that we have to get guns off our street, and we have to be stronger on our policing. And so when Candy talks about we just don't need cops, maybe we need better cops, and maybe we need more funding for that. And how do we get better cops? More funding.
Candy?
Thank you. I got a lot of flack for this one when I introduced the peacekeeping department, but what it was a recognition of what you just mentioned. We need to sophisticate our understanding of what public safety means and how we do it, and we can't expect traditional police officers to maintain public safety anymore because our needs have become much more sophisticated. You're talking about youth economic opportunities as a violence interrupter. Absolutely. I have never seen DPD collaborating with DHS, DDO, or Office of Children's Affairs to create those youth opportunities, restorative justice opportunities. Those are few and far between, and you have to already be committed, you have to already be charged of a crime by the DA to even get referred to the restorative justice programs. And so I think we do need to sophisticate what our cops are doing, and that requires us to reimagine policing.
I think it requires leadership. And let me start first with the violent crime question, and I'll go to how as a leader we bring folks together in the communities to address it. And first and foremost, violent crimes are increasing because of economic impacts to our families. The inability to find jobs, the inability to find good jobs and stay in communities that you love, inability to be in communities with families that you know and friends that you know. Our communities are fraying at the edges. And without council folks who are fighting to ensure that housing is affordable, fighting to ensure that families can stay together and that we can work and live in the cities that we build, we'll continue to see those stresses on families, and we can continue to see increases in crime. As a candidate, I've held meetings with Denver Police Department. I've held meetings with DHA. I've held meetings with Wellspring. And I've brought those communities together to discuss crime, to discuss the reduction in crimes.
I'm not a council member, and I've done that in the last 8 months as a candidate. As your city council member, I'll continue to do the same thing. Thank you.
Moderator, we need to take a quick 1-minute break for tech.
Fantastic.
Oh, I'm surprised I got that much time out of it, to be honest with you. Don't ever go too far.
So I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, once I tap her door. Yeah, how are you? Battery issues?
Yeah, I just had to pop it in there. It wasn't really issues so much as I just drained it.
Yeah, me too.
Sorry, there's things being shared. It's going great.
It's like, we're trying to keep it closer.
Please take your seats. We're ready to continue.
Actually, David, just 1 sec. Okay. Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, audience. I think we're ready to continue. We have our final question in crime and safety. And we will begin with Candy. The audience, please. Thank you. As shown by the several $1 million a year the city pays in settlements, Denver Police still has an excessive force problem. What policies would you promote to reduce or ideally eliminate excessive force in the police department?
I honestly think it starts with our structure for accountability. Internal Affairs Bureau is basically cops investigating cops, and they have to investigate themselves before it even gets investigated by the independent monitor, and that's very problematic. The independent monitor has no authority over discipline, and I think there needs to be an outside entity that does. I also think that hiring and firing through what are they called? The Civil Service Commission, that they actually, I think, need to be eliminated and replaced by another entity that is community driven, that is accountability driven. And those are some of the big things, but I think other policies include them carrying their own personal insurance. which would deter them from bad behavior. And I think that we need to have a very public database of their infractions.
Sure.
I think it begins on the top from the chief. I think it's important to make sure that we have the correct culture, that we hire or appoint the right person in that role. And that's going to be the role of the next mayor, with input from Denver City Council members to who that leader is. I think the Office of the Independent Monitor plays an important role. And we've gone through a recent process to hire a new leader of that Office of the Independent Monitor, ensuring that that person has the authority and the support to make the decisions, to hold accountable police officers that misbehave, that engage in biased policing, that impact the lives of residents. As a black man, I can tell you my interactions with Denver police have not all been good. I've chaired the Biased Policing Task Force because I was racially profiled in my own neighborhood. And within that process, I made a requirement that they list the race, age, gender identity of everyone that they contact. Putting that data is going to be important, and making sure that we hold them accountable for those infractions.
Quan.
I think first and foremost, we really have to look at this as a psychological issue. We have to address the amount of PTSD and social insensitivity and really that officers can sometimes develop over time serving in this high-intensive, tough environment. I want higher pay for officers so that more community members feel like that's a career that I would want to do. Somebody who's a social worker, somebody who has a master's, someone who's even has done a little bit of law, saying, okay, I can go serve my community and be a police officer. But we have to have zero tolerance for these issues. And we create a culture where we will be held accountable for these type of things. And I think officers will take a step back and think, am I making the right choice here? Am I treating this person with dignity? And am I doing the job to the best of my ability? Of course, insurance policies and bonding is important. We have to hire culturally sensitive, relevant community leaders from our community that really know the different types of folks in our community that can interact with anybody in our community.
We'll move on to 2 questions about the Park Hill Golf Course. We'll begin with Daryl. The former Park Hill Golf Course is a privately owned piece of land with a publicly owned conservation easement on it. Lifting that easement requires a citywide vote. What is the ideal future of the former golf course, and how would you legally reach that goal given the complicated situation?
There's a lot of emotions on both sides of this issue, on all the sides of this issue. Let me say, the voters will decide on April 4th what happens with the easement. As a policymaker, there are things that I believe, as a leader, it is important for me to take a leadership role in. First and foremost, access to Park Hill Golf Course, historically, has not been available for black and brown folks. Park Hill Golf Course has been redlined. We have not been able over the decades to be there. I think this development provides an opportunity, or at least the plan that the City Council passed, is providing an opportunity for affordable housing that is desperately needed. They're donating a park to the city, a 100-acre park that provides the 4th largest regional park in the city and county of Denver. As a park advocate, that's something that I support thoroughly. It's not only providing access, it's providing deed restricted up to 99 years, affordable housing, rental, as well as housing for sale. I think all of those things are positive.
Quan.
Yeah, so I think the question was the ideal result, right? The
And how do you
ideal,
get there?
and how do we get there? I think we're taking a big step with this next election. I want folks to be very clear. The result of this election will determine how I, as council person, will treat this golf course going forward. I will hold the developers and the owners to what they said that they were going to do, and I'll make sure that it's an inclusive development if it passes. If it doesn't pass, these folks got to go back to the drawing board and bring something back that's going to actually be what the community wants. But if we continue to vote against the golf course development, maybe it shouldn't happen. But what I want to underline is that this is bringing needed density and opportunity to an area that hasn't had it for a long time. It's bringing it in an area that has transit-oriented development, Colorado Boulevard, the highway, as well as the A-line, and bringing a park that would have access. Right now, you can't access it. I am envisioning the future for the golf course where folks are actually having fun playing and living and thriving in that community. So I think it's great for myself, but you all get to decide, and I will respect the decision of the people.
So I first want to remind folks that half of Park Hill Golf Course is in the most polluted zip code in America. Also the most deficient tree canopy in the city of Denver. Trees are a buffer to pollution, they clean the air. We're talking about creating the 4th largest park if we develop on it, but without development, it's the 3rd largest park. I think that we need to recognize that if this passes on the ballot, there's no authority for city council to hold the developer to any agreement. We've already passed that stage. And if we can't hold them accountable to a conservation easement, there's no reason to believe we'd be able to hold them accountable to a development agreement. I think the ideal situation is open space. We have a lot of needs. We could have a food forest. We could have an actual city nursery. We don't have one of those. We have a place where we keep trees, but not where we grow them. We could have that. We could have a true open space planning process to decide what we want in that recreational open space.
Daryl, this is your final rebuttal for 30 seconds.
I think it's important for us as elected officials, if I become an elected official, to speak the truth when it comes to contracts for the city and county of Denver. Community benefit agreement and each of the pieces of legislation that were passed by Denver City Council are binding. So removal of the conservation easement does not remove the legal requirement that a city has to build a park. They don't have the option of not doing that. The city has to build affordable housing. They don't have an option of not to do that. The developer has to provide $20 million to the city. That is not an option. That's a contract.
The conservation easement is a contract.
For our second question, related to the Park Hill Golf Course, we'll begin with Juan. This also comes from the Greater Park Hill News. What should the Park and Rec's advisory board's role be in advising council? How seriously should the city council take their recommendations? This question is in this category because the PRAB has formally adopted a resolution recommending the city purchase the property for a park.
Okay, so
Should the Park and Rec advisory board's role be in advising council? How seriously should the city council take their recommendations?
well, I think that the city should definitely listen to our committees and boards, and that's one big problem that we're not doing enough of. However, this is private property, and is the easement a contract? If that's how you want to look at it, it's really a zoning restriction. It clearly states that this private property is supposed to stay as a golf course. So if we actually want to change it, we have to come up with an agreement between those who own it and the community on what should happen going forward. They have done that to bring something forward. Whether you like it or not, you get to decide and we get to vote on it. And that, the will of the people, is important. Just like with the camping ban, with not a single precinct voted to overturn our camping ban, we have a council person that's trying to overturn our camping ban. I'm not going to do that to you all. If you all say no to this project, I'm going to stand with the people.
I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what a conservation easement is and how it was inherited by the current developer. It's perpetual. It's not designed to be something that's negotiated. It's something that has to be lifted by the courts. I think the PRAB is one of the unique boards and commissions where each council member has the opportunity to appoint their own member. And when they have the ability to oversee a department, which is very rare, I think that we should be listening to their recommendations because they are an extension and a representative of the communities that they live in. Therefore, they are communicating the will of the communities that they are representing. And so it's not just a board that's asking us to do something, it's an entire constituency that's asking us to do the will of the people. So we should listen.
As a former chair of the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, I can tell you our role explicit within the charter is to provide advice to the Department of Parks and Recreation. That's our role. That's all the power that we have. No council member, no individual can increase or retract that role. It's in the charter. Specific to the Park Hill Golf Course, once again, it is important for us to say that the community has spoken on that site design. The community has shared that they want their voices to be heard. And the fact that a predominantly African American community has been ignored through redlining, has been ignored through access to a park, and now they're being ignored as far as their desires to have places for their families to recreate and that where they will have access. Within this process, we're also providing a prioritization policy. So if folks who live in Park Hill and that were displaced or gentrified out of Park Hill, they can move back. I think that's a good deal for everyone.
Our next category is individual questions for the candidates. As a reminder, we selected 3 questions. Only the candidate who the question is directed towards will answer this question. For the audience, I will tell you that these are fairly direct questions, and again, appreciate your silence to respect the candidate's ability to answer. We'll begin with Candy. As highlighted earlier, you are frequently the lone vote or one of 2 votes in the minority for or against many issues on council. Your detractors have pointed to this, claiming you're an ineffective member of council, and often refer to you with terms like combative. If returned to council, do you believe you can be more effective in building support for your efforts in a second term, or should voters expect more 12-to-1 votes?
I think, again, looking at the data, I voted on over 6,000 pieces of legislation, and you hear about maybe 5 pieces in the news over the last 4 years. I think that you would want somebody who would stand up for you when the time is right, and I will always do that. I'm not afraid to stand alone when I have to, when my community asks me to, and that is the sign of a good leader. I've compromised and I've collaborated many times, and I have passed many things with my colleagues. I think that narrative is destructive and engineered because of the power that I've had. You can't have it both ways. You can't have someone you call ineffective and then also recognize that they are the sole target of an entire developer campaign citywide. You can't have both of those things at the same time. I've been very effective.
As these questions directed only at one candidate, we will not have rebuttals for these 3. We'll move on to Daryl. In 2003, you pled guilty to wrongs to a minor after admitting you hit a child, causing bruises. This came to light in 2007 during a previous run for Denver Council then, in which you were unsuccessful. Abuse of a child is a serious issue. Please explain that situation and why voters should put trust in you now.
I think that is important, and I thank you for the question. In 2003, my then partner and I accepted a plea to a misdemeanor related to disciplining my partner's son. It is not something I take lightly. Let me share with the audience. 33% of African Americans, males, have a misdemeanor on their record. Upwards of 25% of those folks are unsheltered because they can't find housing because of that misdemeanor on their record. They can't be duly employed because of that misdemeanor on their record. Let me be clear. My life was the impact from that event didn't impact me as it did so many other black and brown men in our community. That was 20 years ago. My focus is what have I done since then? How have I brought community together? I would work to ensure that men who have faced similar situations that I'm in, that we can change criminalization of black men and allow them to be able to come back to community and come back to the society.
Juan, you worked for former District 9 Council member Elvis Brooks. You also worked in a high-profile position for Mayor Hancock. Given your strong ties to two controversial, high-profile politicians, how can you assure voters you'll be an independent voice on council and not overly influenced by political interests?
That's a great question. I don't have their support. Why is that? Because I'm standing with community. I'm standing with folks that help them get elected. I'm standing with folks that put their promises and their belief in these men. And I do think that they were great men, but I'm working to be better now. I'm working to deliver on the things that I say that I'm going to do, and staying in community. That's one thing I heard. I can accept the criticism of the folks that I work for, but understand this: I'm a younger, different person and have a different set of values. And I think that they brought the city forward, but I'm a different type of leader. And if that's not clear, you'll see on election day, because we've knocked on over 10,000 doors in this community. We're listening to folks and we're crafting policy that is going to actually help people that really got Elvis Brooks and Mayor Hancock elected.
Thank you all for your direct answers to those questions. We'll do a few lightning round before moving on to audience questions. For the lightning round, please begin your answer with yes or no, and then you'll have 10 seconds to explain. And we'll be beginning with Daryl. A February 3rd, 2022 Denverite article revealed that less than 4% of complaints about unshoveled sidewalks resulted in fines. Do you think the city should more strongly enforce sidewalk clearing policies with more fines?
No, I think that the city really needs to work more collaboratively with neighbors. We need to make sure that we're providing more snow angels. We need to make sure we're providing more city services, hiring folks within the city to provide that support.
No, but the fines aren't working. We're all getting fined for this and that and everything else. We need the city to step up and actually clean our sidewalks and our streets, and that should be a commitment, and it should be part of the package of things that we're all paying for.
No, I've proposed a solution that would cost us less than $1 million to buy ATVs for all of the 78 neighborhoods, one each, and they would be responsible for activating their R&O to plow the sidewalks.
Beginning with Quan. Have you personally taken mass transit, biked, walked, or otherwise commuted by means other than a car in the last 30 days?
Yes, I have.
Yes, I have.
Daryl?
Yes, I have.
All right. Beginning with Candy. Denver City Council currently pays about $101,000 a year. I had that number wrong?
Lower.
Lower.
Lower, trust me.
My
That's
apologies
for
on
the
having
president. That's council president.
All right, 96.
We're about 94 right now.
Okay, my apologies for pulling the correct number on that. Council currently pays about $94,000 a year. Will you vote to increase council member salaries in the next 4 years?
Absolutely.
Daryl?
Yes.
Quan?
So there's 13 members. Oh, sorry, it's a no. No, I wouldn't.
Thank you. Next question, beginning with Daryl. If allowed by state law, would you support any rent control policies?
No.
Quan?
Yes, I would potentially look at different options. It would Yeah, I would do it.
Candy?
Absolutely.
Not a yes, no, but again, we would like an answer in 10 seconds for the next, beginning with Juan. Is there a budget line item in the city's operating budget you would like to see increased or decreased?
Yes, there's lots of them.
Is there a specific one?
Yeah, I would like to see our racial and social equity office actually function and bring social equity and racial equity to our city.
Candy?
I'm going to diverge from the one I want to decrease and talk about the one I want to increase, which is the Office on Aging.
Yes, and this is a budget line item within Denver Parks and Rec for city forestry. We are heat indexed everywhere. We want to increase their budget.
We have an audience member lightning round question to go to, and unless I'm off, we're beginning with.
My mic is dead.
Okay.
Stay.
Thank you, Karen. Unless I got off, I believe we're starting with Candy on this one. Right? Okay. Because there's such a strong need for affordable housing, I would like to know if any of you are landlords personally, and if so, are the units you rent affordable?
I am. I haven't raised rent in over 15 years.
Really?
Is the question, am I a landlord?
Yes.
I am not.
Thank you. Juan?
No, I'm not.
Thank you.
Good job, you expect that, huh?
Move on to environment, mixing in some audience member questions here. Denver has a chief climate officer, popular programs like the e-bike rebates, and the city is seen by many as a leader in environmental efforts. Still, our air quality is out of EPA compliance. As noted by an audience member, pollution has a detrimental impact on children. Specifically, what additional environmental policies would you support related to our air quality and other environmental concerns? And I'm sorry, we'll be beginning with Derek.
I kind of shared a little bit about that before. I was born and raised with asthma. And so this really impacts me, impacts a lot of Black families. As we are sitting in Globeville, I'll speak specifically Globeville. I think the policy focus that we must have pertaining to two of our polluters that increases reduction in good air quality is the I-70 development or redevelopment and also Sunburn. So first and foremost with I-70, we need to make sure that within policy that we hold them accountable for community air quality monitoring and make sure that penalties for not doing so are enforced. Suncor is another deal. They've stopped refining last March. About 4 months ago, and they're going to begin refining again in March. Once that refining begins, we need to make sure that they also pay for a community-based air monitoring, and that we have policies from the federal, state, and local level to hold them accountable for their pollution or any of their infractions to air quality.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of science around this, but we need to be looking at more carbon capture. We need to be looking at planting more trees, and we need to be bringing solutions to our community members that they can afford or stepping into the gap to provide more affordability. Since I bought an electric car, sometimes I'm astounded when I step into a gas car just how much exhaust I'm even breathing. So imagine if we could get more electric vehicles out there. Also electrifying our older homes in our community. But of course we have to limit our factories in our GES, in our Louisville area, Swansea area, as well as the Commerce City area. Really looking at it more statewide and how we can really transition away from polluters.
Andy.
I also also have severe respiratory issues growing up in this neighborhood. GES, people lose their life 3.5 years sooner than other people because of the pollution here, and kids have 40% more ER visits because of the issues here. I helped pass the first air monitoring bill at the state legislature last year because what we were doing was exploring our ability to implement pollution trespass ordinances. We faced some issues with state preemption, and that's how we got involved in the coalition to pass that air monitoring bill. We also took EPA on the field trip that catalyzed the investigation of Suncor, and so we're planning to stay on top of that. We're monitoring the air over there, and hoping that we could get some more substantial enforcement from CDPHE. We've brought together our DDPHE air monitoring office. We're pushing them. They don't want to go above and beyond what CDPHE does, but we're going to push them.
We have one more environmental question, and then we'll go back to an audience question. We'll begin with Kwan. Do you support stronger environmental requirements such as greener building materials, solar panels, green roofs, etc.? If so, do you differentiate between commercial buildings, multifamily, or single family? Or generally speaking, what sort of additional green requirements would you like to see on development or existing structures?
Well, I think that when we talk about changing the requirements, we need to make sure that these requirements are equitable across all the different types of development. As a person who might be developing a single family home or trying to transition their home, they need to have the access to be able to do that and being able to buy green technology. Green technology is typically on the higher end, and like I said, as somebody who lives very green, I was an eco leader at CSU and helped make CSU the first platinum LEED campus in the country. I strongly believe in moving our technology forward, but we have to understand that folks in our community that can't afford to do that need to be brought into the conversation. And I think that's where the city can step in to provide the incentives as well as the relief for folks who want to move into that environment. Every person, a part of our community, needs to be part of the solution to saving our planet, and we need the city to provide that incentive.
Andy.
Given what's going on with Excel, I think there's a structural conversation to be had about municipalizing our utilities in a way that encourages us to do better with our green infrastructure. I pulled together a group of businesses that have warehouses in the Swansea community to put solar on their roofs and generate energy where the surplus would be then donated to low-income households. We can do that as a city, but we have to municipalize our utilities because Excel is not about this. I was co-sponsoring the carbon tax back in the day that did not pass, and all we heard from Excel was excuses, and those excuses are not going to allow us to meet our climate goals anytime soon. And it's the only way to make it a reasonable investment for the city to dump a lot of money into green infrastructure. We have to have municipal utilities. Yeah.
I think it's important that we focus on green energy and our economy and the impacts of green energy to our economy. I propose an energy improvement district, and there are several of those districts on the East Coast. And what those districts do is that they share energy. Buildings, developers, more affluent folks that can put solar panels on their homes, incentivizing developers to put more solar panels on their buildings. Those excess energy is then shared with folks who can't afford it. It creates a district without changing who is the lead energy provider within the city. I think the city and county of Denver has a lot going on right now. Leading a municipal energy company, I think is something that is really not in the cards for them. We need to work with Excel. We need to work with other energy providers. We need to make sure that we are providing e-charging for spaces in public places for folks like Juan and others that have electric cars and don't have the ability to put them in their apartments.
We have one more audience question before we move to our final question for the evening. From the audience, racial bias is present throughout our housing system, including in, quote, affordable housing. How will you infuse equity into the city's housing investments? And I apologize, I just got off on, I believe it's Candy first. Correct?
I think that we need to, in addition to the housing preference policy, which is a very tiny program targeting the little bit of 10% affordable housing that we get from developments. Aside from that, we need to recognize that the structure of affordable housing is deeply problematic. Tying affordability to the area's median income means that we're always subject to the changing or gentrifying nature of our city. As we densify with 90% unaffordable housing in a historically Black or brown area, that means we're raising the area's median income in that area for the following year. What that means is everybody who got in to affordable housing the previous year, their rent goes up based on that 10 to 14% increase of AMI that we drove there with the 90% unaffordable. And so I think we need to understand that and do it differently.
Carol.
I think there's two things. At first, let me provide a clarifying area median income for rental housing. My mom is in a subsidized rental housing based on her income. It's based on her income. It's not based on the income of the thousands of other folks within the city and county of Denver. Area median income doesn't increase my mom's rent every year or over the past 5 years based on the increase of area median income for the city. That's a falsehood. It's based on her individual income, and it will increase based on whether her income goes up, not everybody else around her. That's one thing. The second thing on racial bias and racial profiling, I think we need to really look at HOAs and ensure that when HOAs, that they do not have the ability to put liens on homes of folks. We've seen that in Montbello. We've seen it across the city. Predominantly African-American and Latino families are losing their homes for $10, $15, $20 a pop. That is wrong, and that needs to change. We need to make sure that we're targeting Black and brown families for rent subsidies and support. All of that is important.
Yeah, this is a topic I can go on for days, but I do want to clarify that both Candy and Daryl were right. I think you guys are both talking about different programs, so let's talk about that. But there is a lot of discrimination, and a lot of discrimination happens in the fact that African American folks may tend to be overrepresented in our justice system as well as within poverty and homelessness, and so you get the apartment buildings are still finding ways to discriminate against folks and not allowing them to apply or accepting their income. So we have to do more work there. But I want to raise the standard again, talking about home ownership. African American home ownership in Colorado is 37%. That is unacceptable. And so folks do not have the options to actually stay in their communities, have the agency to do what they want with their property, and those are the type of programs that we need to be talking about in our communities. But of course, we got to get rid of the bias. We have to get rid of the problems within our assistance system, and particularly the cliff effect, where folks do not, like my mom, did not want to make too much to lose those same benefits as she did.
For our final question this evening, we'll begin with Daryl. From all of the questions that you've heard tonight, and all the questions that our media outlets and the others have been asking you, what have we not been asking you that you feel is important for voters to know?
It's a good question. I think within the questions that we've been asking, it's really the quality of life in Denver. Just a kind of overarching, what makes Denver a place that we all want to live? What makes Denver a place that we get into these fights and these quarrels about, from Parkville Golf Course to affordable housing to AMI? Why is Denver the place that we've chosen to be our home? And I think it's important for your next leader to have vision, to have love for a city that they're in, and to have vision for what the future can look like.
there's not enough questions about really what are we going to do to ensure that the next generation enjoys the city that we chose to live in. I moved here in 1987 as a young man from a small island because I wanted to see more. I wanted a bigger life. And I think that's an important question. A leader must have hope, a leader must have passion, and that's what I'll bring to this race, and that's what I'll bring as your next city council person.
I think for the challengers in this race, we haven't been talking enough about experience. I want to reiterate that I worked at all 3 levels of government, so working with James Coleman and Pat, we helped pass so much legislation. Working with U.S. Senator Michael Bennett, we were fighting back against Donald Trump. And working within Mayor Hancock's office, I've been able to create coalitions within various communities and actually help us when we were in our COVID crisis. I wasn't tweeting about trying to get COVID infected to Republicans and people who don't think like me. I was out there on the front lines doing the work. I advanced the 5280 trail as a member of the committee. I'm on the board of the Newman Center for Performing Arts, bringing arts to for more arts opportunities for communities of color. The Downtown Denver Partnership, investing in civic programs. The Underdog Family, actually providing the first website for Walton Street Cafe, starting scholarships with the United Men of Color, building an 11,000 square foot incubator in the community of Montbello, and doing the Walton Street Renaissance, bringing murals in a stage to 5 Points.
Oh, all the fun stuff you guys hear and say in the media, and you see that I get marginalized on council, you see that the media beats me up and doesn't tell the whole truth, you see colleagues who support 95% of the things that I'm doing and are still going to run against me. None of you are asking me why I endure it. And I endure it because I believe in the power of the people. And I believe that all of those things are just an indicator of how good I've been doing this job, how well I've been doing this job, and what potential exists when I get a council full of colleagues who also have that common vision of power for the people. I love my community. I will continue fighting for my community.
Awesome. I just wanted to say, when folks give you criticism, you should listen to it, right? You should be committed to changing. What I would like to hear more from our councilperson, especially if she's elected, what are you going to do differently? Folks are challenging you because they are frustrated with how you ran your office and how you have demonstrated your leadership. You are directly attacking members on council, and now you're hoping that they don't get elected and some other people do, and you can start fresh. We would know about all the work you've done if you had a town hall in the last couple of years. People want change, and so if you are reelected, I hope you bring that change.
All right, thank all 3 of you this evening for being here, and thank you to our audience. Thank you to CSU as our hosts, and everyone, have a lovely evening.
Nero, you want to do the annual picture? Yeah.
Thank you so much. Nice, thank you.
give